Hello, friends. Can you hear me? How do I come in? Any stream issues with sound or video? Excuse me while I quickly go get my glasses that I forgot. No issues. It sounds fine. Very good. I'm going to do something I've seen so many people do throughout my life. I'm only starting to do it now. Cleaning the glasses for when I need them. Because we will do some chanting and some reading today. All right. Cleaning the glasses. You know what they say? Don't fret growing old, because it is a privilege denied to many. Of course, the Buddha has other things to say about growing old, but there is a point to that in some ways, I guess. All right. Let's see who has joined. What time is it? It's probably a little bit after 7. We'll give it another minute or two to see if we have more people come. Cunning. See, Amy, I keep forgetting that you were Cunning Corvid, because I was like, oh, I remember that name from back in the day. You just came out like the rest of us, right? When everybody's using their first names in the Discord. That's all. All right. So, I guess what we'll do is, you're a trendsetter. That's right. So, what we'll do is we can get started as we usually do. If anybody has any topics or questions or anything that you would like me to go over, anything you'd like for us to discuss, you can put that in the chat. And while we're doing that, I can do my first chanting in the Bhavana Vandana, now renamed in the smaller form, Buddhist Suttas for Recitation, but it's the Bhavana Vandana. Same book, just in a smaller, easier to travel package. So what I'm going to start with is the Gautami Sutta, the discourse to Gautami. It's a very good sutta, and how the Buddha tells us how to find what is Dhamma and what is not. Yeah, actually, I like the cover of it too. It's kind of nice. I like the color too. That's I guess part of it, but it is a nice book. All right, so we have a question already. Well, let me. I will mark this question, and after we do this chanting, then we'll come back to it. So I guess since we're doing the chanting, I should start out. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Greeno Beano, book clinging. Actually, not so much. I mean, I do like the Bhavana Vandana. It definitely has its uses. And this is much easier to travel around with. much easier to travel around with than that big book. Even though it's thin, it's still pretty cumbersome. So, Gautami Sutta. As usual, we'll do, actually, this is just 3 paragraphs. So I will do 1 paragraph in the Pali, 1 paragraph in English. Okay? Ekang samayang bhagava vesaliyang viharati mahavane kutagara salayam attakop mahapajapati gotami yena bhagava ten upasankamitva bhagavantang abhivadetva ekamantang attasi ekamantang titako Mahapajapati Gotami Bhagavantang etadavocha sadhu mibante bhagava sankitena dhammang desetu yang ahang bhagavato dhammang sutva eka vupakata appamatta atapini pahitata viharayenti. So, English. I was watching some of your, the truth is the way, I was watching some of your first videos the other day when you were a layperson. It's funny how different you used to pronounce things. Yeah, in the beginning I pronounced Pali really bad, and now I pronounce Pali less bad. So, but I'm getting there. Yeah. Okay. One time, the Sublime One was staying at Vesali in the peaked roof hall in the great forest. Then Mahapajapati Gotami. We know who Mahapajapati Gotami is? Anybody not know who Mahapajapati Gotami is? I'm looking at the chat. Yes. In the chat, they're bringing up, those of you who are going to watch this later, in the chat, they're bringing up the old story of when kindergartners made fun of my Pali pronunciation. All right. Mahapajapati Gotami is the Buddha's aunt who raised him, who nursed him after Queen Maya died, or Maya died. And she also became the first bhikkhuni. Right? She's the mother of the bhikkhuni sangha. So Mahapajapati Gotami approached the Sublime One, and having bowed down to the Sublime One, stood to one side. As she was standing to one side, she said, "It would be good, Venerable Sir, if the Sublime One would teach me the Dhamma in brief, such that, having heard the Dhamma from the Sublime One, I might dwell alone, secluded, diligent, earnest, and resolute." Yeko tvang gotami. This is Buddha's response. Yeko tvang gotami dhamme jane sai ime dhamma saragaya samvattanti no viragaya sangyogaya samvattanti no visangyogaya achayaya samvattanti no appachaya mahichataya sangvattanti no apichahataya asantuttiya sangvattanti no santuttiya sanganikaya sangvattanti no pavivekaya kosajjaya samvattanti no virarambhaya dubharataya samvattanti no subharatayatati ekang sena gotami dharaye sai neso dhammo neso vineo netang satussahanti. So, this Buddha's response. Gotami, of the qualities of which you may know. This is very important, right? Very important. This is how you know Dhamma. This is how you know what the Buddha's teachings. This is how you know if something is Dhamma or not. Gautami, the qualities of which you may know. These qualities lead to passion, not to dispassion, to being fettered, not to being unfettered, to self-aggrandizement, not to self-effacement, to overweening ambition, not to modesty, to discontent, not to contentment, to entanglement, not to seclusion, to laziness, not to the arousal of energy, to being burdensome, not being unburdensome. You, Gautami, may definitely hold this is not Dhamma. This is not the Vinaya, the monastic rules. This is not the teacher's instructions, right? So think about this. Is if the practice is leading you towards these things, right? Or leading you away from the opposite of these things, then you know, yeah, this is not Dhamma. This is what they would call, you hear this, you might hear this often from, the Sri Lankan monastics or Burmese monastics. They would say, Adhamma, Adhamma. It means not Dhamma. It's dangerous Dhamma. Dhamma that is not, does not lead to skillfulness, is not the path of the Buddha. So you have to be wary of Adhamma. All right. This is not Dhamma. This is not the Vinaya. This is not the teacher's instructions, right? If it leads to passion, if it's increasing your craving, right? Increasing your desire, then that's not Dhamma. Right? Dhamma is for decreasing desire. Dhamma is for eradicating passion, right? Being fettered. You know what a fetter is? A fetter is a chain, right? We have 10 fetters that chain us to the wheel of samsara, that chain us to having to be reborn over and over and over again. And if we're strengthening those chains instead of breaking those chains, then that's not Dhamma, right? Entanglement instead of seclusion is getting involved in all kinds of things, right? Instead of being secluded from things. This is very important. Right? So this is very clear, small. It's only a paragraph, right? But the Buddha teaches us how to recognize Dhamma in that paragraph. So, third paragraph. Ye chako tvang Gautami dhamme jhane sai ya ime dhamma viragaya samvattanti no saragaya visangyogaya samvattanti no sangyogaya apachaya samvattanti no achayaya apichataya samvattanti no mahichataya santuttiya Sangvattanti no asantuttiya pavivekaya sangvattanti no sanganikaya virya rambhaya samvattanti no kosajjaya subharataya sangvattanti no dubharatayati ekam sena Gautami dharesai dhares ayasi eso dhammo eso vinyo etang satussahanti. So, as for the qualities which you, Gautama, may know, these qualities lead to dispassion. These not passion. They are to being unfettered, not being fettered, to self-effacement, not self-aggrandizement, to modesty, not overweening ambition, to contentment, not to discontent, to seclusion, not to entanglement, to the arousal of energy, not to laziness. Do we know the one time in the Buddha's discourse in all of the sutras, the one time where the Buddha allows you to be lazy? Does anybody know it? Besides our A+ students in the front of the class who are raising their hands already. Adriana, do you remember? Maybe Adriana remembers. All right. There's one time where the Buddha approves of being lazy. Green, I know, when he lets me kill stuff. Yeah. If your Dhamma is bad. Yeah, exactly. So the Buddha says, I approve of only one time of being lazy. And he says that in a badly taught Dhamma and discipline. So what does this mean? This means that if your teacher teaches you to go out and kill people, to go out and steal, to go out and have sexual misconduct, to go out and, drink and do all these kind of things that lead to unskillfulness, that lead to passion, that lead to entanglement, all these things, the Buddha says, that's when you can be lazy. Don't be lazy in following that Dhamma. Don't be lazy in following the good Dhamma. So that is the only time that the Buddha says that we can be lazy. Other than that, he doesn't like laziness. No laziness. Oh, the truth is the way. I'm sorry that the live stream is not doing well. I was watching another live stream, a YouTube live stream, and they were talking about how on YouTube's end, there's this kind of disconnect between the voice, like the video, and the and the audio, and it seems to be a YouTube problem. It's definitely not. I mean, I have normal internet, so that should be no problem on my end. But I have seen some issues with YouTube streaming for one thing or another. So if there's problems, that is to be expected. All right. Okay, so I didn't finish. To the arousal of energy, not laziness, to being unburdensome, not to being burdensome. You, Gotami, may definitely hold this is the Dhamma. This is the Vinaya. This is the teacher's instructions, right? So the Buddha, one of his last instructions is, right, what? To be an island unto yourself. So the Buddha gives us these things like this, right? In multiple suttas, he gives us the way to judge something, right? To judge if what you hear, there's another sutta where the Buddha teaches you how to judge if what you hear is the Dhamma, right? Did the Buddha say these words, right? There's another one. I was trying to remember. I had that one in my mind, and I went over it, and now I forgot. It'll come back. So that is our opening chant. Ah, yes, the 4 great references. Can you post those in the chat, Greeno Bino? So that people can see the 4 great references. I got to admit, it's been quite a while since I read those. I totally blanked out on those. Very good. The 4 great references. Oh, okay. So now I know why I blanked out on that. I was thinking of something else. I was thinking, my mind came up that that there were 4 references to knowing the Dhamma. I could be wrong. I don't know. There was a deep memory that came out. All right. So let me go back to that question. Maybe we'll do some chanting in a bit. But I did want to go back and answer that question from a couple minutes ago. I was looking at possibility of chanting and going through the Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta, actually. because it's not that long. At least not if you skip all the parts where all of the different devas, let out the cry. That can be forever. But the meat of that sutta is not that long. All right. If you really want to see me botch Pali, me chanting that will be comedy. Talk about Dhamma comedy. All right. So I'm going to be scrolling up. Back to that question. Cindy. Cindy has the mountain internet, so she knows. I won't be able to stay with you live for long. Live video breaks up on my crappy internet and constantly buffers. Yep. That's what happens when you have mountain internet. Yeah. That's why you don't have live streams from Bhavana all the time. There would be way more live streaming from Bhavana if we had normal internet, but we don't, so we can't. All right. So P brought in question. Tips for meditating when one has a headache, particularly when one wants to use the breath at the nostrils and the headache is at the forehead. Thanks. Well, I guess what I would say is my first response would be, is this a chronic thing or is this like just when you have a headache? Because that can, the answer can change a little bit depending on that one question. In general, what I would say is if you're trying to meditate, right, if you're trying to follow the breath, I should say, right, because we know, the umbrella term meditation, and at least in Buddhism, really encompasses a lot of different things like Satipatthana, foundations of mindfulness, etc. But if you are, if you're meditating and a headache comes up and it takes you away from your breath, well, you can use that headache as your object of meditation, right? You can switch your mindfulness, switch your awareness to that headache. Really observe it. What is going on? Like, what can you feel, right? You might be able to feel like the pressure, in the body. So you have that feeling, right? And then your mind, right? Your mind might change. What is the general state of your mind? How that changes while you're observing the headache as your head keeps getting crushed, right? The pain and the feeling, the pressure, all of that, observing that, right? And then observe the thoughts that arise, right? The unpleasant feeling of a headache, and the mind state is probably feeling a bit claustrophobic, a bit agitated, right? The thoughts and the impulses arise about trying to alleviate that in some way. That's all learning. That's all that's all something that you can learn from, right? That's all an object of meditation that can teach you insight. So that's what I would suggest in that regard, right? Now, if it's a chronic thing, well, actually, you know what? The next thing is, it does take some patient endurance to stick with something like that, right? And when that endurance is done, it's okay. You can, if you need to take a break, if you need to get up and, do something to alleviate the headache or whatever, that's fine. But you can also, do your best to try to stay with it, try to use it and investigate it and observe it, right? Because pain in the body in one way or another is always going to be there. It's not going away. And so pain can be a very useful, very insightful thing that arises in your body. You can learn a lot from it. So that's what I would suggest. If it's a chronic thing, then it really becomes part of your practice, right? Because it's not going away. I mean, it might go a little bit away and then it comes back and all that kind of stuff. But if it's something that's pretty much there most of the time, then it becomes a large part of practice, right? It becomes, we all have different things that kind of incline us to one thing or another. Like for me, I'm much more inclined into satipatthana than I am mindfulness of breathing, even though I do mindfulness of breathing a lot. I do satipatthana way more because I'm doing it, you don't have to just sit for that. But it's not something that, because of my asthma and things like that, I was inclined to, right? So it was always it's always been more of a struggle to me than maybe some other people, right? So because of your, if it's a chronic thing, because of the unique circumstances, then it's, in that regard, it will be a bit more of a struggle for you than other people. But that doesn't mean that you can't practice and use it as a wonderful, painful teacher. Right? Painful tool for the development of insight. Just scrolling through the chat here. YouTube has banned the word nibbana? Really? That's interesting. YouTube has banned a lot of things. It's getting a little crazy. But that's the way it is. What are you going to do? Hello, Gautam and Bella. Good to hear from you. Tulia, what are we up to tonight? Well, that remains to be seen, right? Dhammapalooza is always meant to be a free-flowing kind of a thing. I mean, I come with some things, but I don't like to overplan it. I like to kind of see where it goes, right? So that each Dhammapalooza is different, right? The schedule is different. How things go is different. It's kind of interesting. It's kind of fun going with the flow and going on the fly here. So. Oh, Gabriella, that is a wonderful question. And I definitely can't answer it extensively because I'm a Western Buddhist. But I can answer some of the things that I have come across. Okay, so Bante Gabriella asked, what are the cultural nuances that Western Buddhists can miss due to being born in a non-Buddhist country? Cultural nuances. Well, one of the things that's very important that I hear a lot, and we, in a way, we can't be blamed as Westerners because what we know of Buddhism and monks is the Dalai Lama, right? We know the Dalai Lama. He's laughing, he's smiling, he's having fun, he's hugging people and doing all these kind of things, right? And in a way, we kind of assume that that's what Buddhism is, right? And in many ways, he's more of an outlier than a what's the word? He's more of an outlier than an example of normal Buddhism, right? So we kind of we from various sources we kind of have different views of what Buddhism is compared to the reality of what Buddhism is. And the more you get involved in it, then the more you understand. So cultural nuances. One of the most important things to understand is that I remember I got invited to this Buddhist humor thing on Facebook, and I posted some things, and some guy writes a comment, "Oh, Buddhists have the most wonderful, sense of humor." And I wanted to type, I didn't do it, but I wanted to. I'm like, just don't do anything untoward in Burma because you're going to go to jail. Right? This is a very important thing. Like, we kind of have this view that like Buddhism is very kind of lighthearted and everybody's jokey and all these kind of things. That's not the case. That is not the case. If you really get involved into it, you see like a lot of the Burmese or the Sri Lankan or the Thai monks are kind of like this, right? They're very kind of serious. And one of the things that I found as a monk is like, in many ways, I'm kind of two different people depending on who I'm with, right? If I'm with Westerners, I'm a bit more, I don't know if you want to say myself, I'm a bit more of this kind of loud, maybe annoying, jokey kind of person. But that's not what is kind of expected in a lot of the Buddhist cultures. You're supposed to be very serious and dignified, and you don't want to make the sangha look bad and all these kind of things, right? And so, and in many of these Buddhist cultures, especially Sri Lanka, and for many reasons, rightly so, because in all honesty, Sri Lanka basically kept Buddhism alive, especially in the first hundreds of years. Pretty much Buddhism survived as a tradition, as a religion, as whatever you want to call it, because of Sri Lanka. So they have, rightly so, they have a lot of good claim to being protectors of Buddhism, protectors of the Dhamma, right? So in Buddhist countries, that's a big thing, right? They are feeling like that they are protecting the Dhamma, keeping it alive, keeping it from being corrupted, right? And so this is something that many people take very seriously. So you will see things like, people put Buddha on an advertisement at a nightclub, and those guys get like 7 years in jail in Burma. Right? You'll see things like that because it's taken very seriously. And so you really shouldn't, that's something that you should respect and understand as a Westerner, right? That this is, you're a kind of convert Buddhist, and you have a certain views and understandings of what Buddhism is and all these kind of things. But it can be very different than the reality on the ground in Buddhist countries. The other thing that's important to understand is this. About 4 years ago, there's a young Sri Lankan guy who came to Bhavana. And he told me something that blew my mind. He said that I was never able to read the suttas until I read them in English, because they're not available in my country's basic vernacular, right? So this is a person who grew up his whole life, and what he learned was from what the monks told him, right? He wasn't able to read the suttas for himself and do all these kind of things, right? So you have cultures so we are lucky as Westerners that we get to see we get to read what the people in these Buddhist countries have saved and kept alive for thousands of years. We get to read it oftentimes, and we get to know more about the suttas than the people who live in those countries, right? And that's unfortunate. I mean, I think it's changing in many ways, but that was something that was really sad to me. It reminded me of in Christianity, right? For some odd years, however many thousands of years, that the Bible was only in Latin, in Greek, right? Only the scholarly people could know it, right? But now, and that lasted even into my mom's lifetime. Really, only like 10 years before me was the Mass stopped saying in Latin, right? 10 years before I was born. So this is not even a modern. So I get that, right? Like, that ability for people to see that. So that's also important. The other thing is to understand that I would say is that there is a kind of there's a view in many of the Buddhist countries that the Dhamma is so adama now that it's so corrupted that nobody can become awakened. And this is why you will see that the majority of people in Buddhist countries, including monastics, do not meditate, right? And this is one of the reasons why. This is because this view that the Dhamma is so corrupt, we can't really meditate, we can't become awakened anymore. So why meditate? We'll just do good deeds. As monks, we'll learn the Dhamma and keep it alive, and that's a good deed for us. And then maybe we'll be reborn in the next life of the next Buddha, and we can become awakened then, right? So these are kind of just small examples of, and it's not an exhaustive list, but these are kind of small examples of things that Westerners learn when you get involved and you get in Buddhist circles and things like that. Over time, you understand, you learn these things and you understand them, and you say, oh, okay, this is not what I thought it was. It's different, right? And there can be a little bit of a conflict, between this kind of, especially if it looks like, oh, these Westerners are trying to change everything, and they're making more adama in the world, right? So there's this, there's their view of it, and then there's our view of it as like, well, this is, we need to change some things because this doesn't match with our cultural, the way our culture is now and things like that. So there's this kind of, there's a little bit of a tug of war, a little bit of a kind of tension there. It's something I saw at Bhavana, for many years. There's a bit of that tension between the old and the new, I think it's something that Westerners should understand and respect. And, that doesn't necessarily mean that we have to, that nothing needs to be changed, or that we can't kind of adapt Buddhism to our own culture in many ways, which we can. I mean, Sri Lanka, Buddhism has been in Sri Lanka for like 2,000 years, but like Thailand and like Burma and a lot of these other countries, they weren't, they don't have 2,000 years of Buddhist culture, right? So that, just like they became, kind of Buddhist countries, like Western countries can over time develop their kind of Buddhism and things like that. So there's a lot of different things that we should keep in mind, right? That when we engage with Buddhists, either Western Buddhists, Asian Buddhists, whatever, we should keep those in mind. Oh, Johnny comes out with a tough left hook. Oh boy. I'm just gonna, Johnny, I'll get back to your question. I'm just gonna scroll down to see any more comments to what I just said. Okay, so nobody commented. All right, so that's good. So one last thing about what I say, one joke that I say is that oftentimes Eastern Buddhists, people from Buddhist countries, their main thing is practicing dana, generosity, and practicing morality, living by skillful ethics, right? But they don't, a lot of them don't do meditation, although that is changing. There's a lot of movements in the Buddhist countries, as far as I know. I've spoken to some people in those countries. Westerners, on the other hand, we're like, we just want to do this meditation thing. We don't want to deal with this ethics and all this other crap. That's no good, right? So what's happening is both sides, guess what? Both sides are not following the full Noble Eightfold Path, right? So if you put a Westerner and an Easterner together, then you're following the Noble Eightfold Path, right? This is why I harp on this. It's so important to follow the Noble Eightfold Path. Do try to implement and do the whole path, implement that into your life, right? Not just half of it. Try to do the whole path, right? The Buddha gave it. The Buddha didn't give us half a path and half a path. He gave us the whole path, right? Now, of course, people argue not everybody's ready for the whole path, and I guess to each his own. If they're not, then they're not. But it should be encouraged to at least try to follow the whole Noble Eightfold Path. Okay, here comes Johnny Giacomo's left hook. Greetings. I was talking with my daughter today, and she asked this question. If a monk is being attacked, is he justified in defending himself, herself, or do they just have to take a beating? Technically, there is a rule in the Buddhist Vinaya, the monastic rules, that monks are allowed to defend themselves. I would have to look it up for a lot of the specifics. It's not like a huge rule that has a lot of commentary to it, but essentially, if you were being attacked, you are technically allowed to defend yourself. Obviously, you don't want to have the intention of killing, right? You want to have the intention of you're trying to save yourself and get away. So, with that intention, you technically do have that rule. You do have the ability, at least, to be able to defend yourself. And I guess it makes sense. I mean, if you read the Vinaya, both the monks and the nuns who were wandering at the time, they had a rough, right? I mean, they're being killed, they're being raped, they're being forced into doing all kinds of things, because you're wandering ancient India. It's not like in modern times where you can have like the police state and the police are 5 minutes away and there's cameras everywhere. No, you're wandering ancient India, and there's all kinds of bandits and people who are willing to kill you, take advantage of you, whatever, right? So it makes sense that there's this ability to be able to protect yourself. And actually, in that case, also, there's the Buddha will say things like, a bhikkhu and a bhikkhuni are not allowed to travel travel together, right? But there's an exception. When they're going through a dangerous land, then they can travel together, right? So the Buddha gives these kind of exceptions of trying to help each other out, like being a group of going here. So to kind of make yourself not as easy a target, right? Before you'd have to actually kind of use a stick or something and defend yourself. But technically, yes, you can defend yourself. But that is one of another one of those things that Westerners actually kind of have a misconception of, like Buddhists are total pacifists and all these things. You can even see now the Buddha never approved of killing or anything like that, but he understood that kingdoms have armies and armies go to war and things like that. Like he never said there should be no armies and no wars and no kingdoms, and he never did anything like that. He's always talking about the individual. So now let's see, where am I going with this? Oh yes, now I remember. Okay. But there's also nothing in there that says that you're supposed to just kind of just take whatever abuse is given towards you and all these kind of things, right? There's nothing that says that. Like the Buddha says quite clearly, don't sacrifice yourself, at the expense of others, right? The Buddha says that, there's the simile of the gift, right? Where this is, a great one, because the Buddha, is somebody comes to the Buddha, a Brahmin, and he abuses him and he says bad things about him and all these kind of things. And the Buddha says, when you go to somebody's house, do you bring a gift? And the person's like, yes, that is our tradition, right? This is one of the interesting things about reading the suttas, right? It's like, because I grew up in a culture that you don't go to somebody's house without bringing a gift, right? So you can see, like, 2,600 years ago, this interesting cultural thing. So the Buddha says, okay, when you give a gift, when you bring a gift to somebody, what do you do if you don't accept it? And the person said, well, we take it and use it for ourselves. And so the Buddha says, just like that, you have given me a gift, and I don't accept it, take it back. Right? So he's like, you've given me a gift of coming here and verbally abusing me. Guess what? I don't have to accept that. It's yours. You take it back. Right? So there's nothing in Buddhism, that says that we have to be pushovers, right? That we can't defend ourselves, protect ourselves, that we just allow people to abuse us and to take advantage of us. There's nothing in Buddhism that I've seen that allows for that. Now, of course, we don't want to kill people and do things unskillfully. We have to try our best to deal with any kind of situation as skillfully as possible. And it takes a lot of wisdom to be able to. It doesn't take a lot of wisdom to just whack people with a stick, right? Or somebody's attacking you, then you just shoot them with your gun, right? In self-defense. It doesn't take a lot of wisdom to do that. It takes a lot more wisdom to protect yourself without trying to resort to, violence that can kill and all these kind of things. And a lot of that wisdom is what? Not getting into those situations in the first place. That's a large part of that wisdom. As a matter of fact, when I was a gun owner and I did all the gun training and stuff like that, that was one of the things that the trainer said. He says, the most wise thing for you to do is to never put yourself in a situation where you have to use the gun in the first place. Right? So it's the same thing. Right? The most wise thing is to try to put yourself in a situation where you won't have to defend yourself in the first place. All right. Scrolling down. What time is it? We're at the end of the first hour already. These things always go really quick. All right. Now, Cindy, one thing that I've noticed is that when you're watching a YouTube live stream, there's a little red button on the bottom, right? There's a little red button on the bottom there, and it says live. If you kind of take your scroll button and put it all the way to the front, the live button goes off, and then you can watch that at your leisure. So you're kind of technically watching it live, but you're not. So it's still going on, but you're not watching it live stream anymore. So that's that could be a way of doing it. Obviously, the question, if you want to ask a question, that's not going to match up with, the video, but that is one way of doing it, to watch it semi-live. Adriana Abante, let's say we wish to meditate for 45 minutes. Is it okay to break up the session with half walking meditation, half sitting? Or is it better to just sit for that time? That's a good question. Very good question. I would say this. If you meditate for an hour, right? And so this is my normal, if I meditate for an hour, if I go to the meditation hall, what I'll usually do is I'll do 20 minutes of walking first. Then I'll do 10 minutes of mindfulness of death and metta. And then I'll do the last half hour of sitting, right? So that's usually how I break up my hour. Now, there is one caveat to that. If the conditions are right and I'm kind of feeling in my practice the need to sit more, then I'll adjust my practice and I'll try to sit more. For me, like I was saying before, I'm not a huge follow your breath sitter person. A half hour is, if I can sit calmly and quietly and peacefully for a half hour or more, that's a big thing for me. That's not a normal everyday thing. But there's some times in my practice where things are working out that I can just feel it, and my intuition and everything is telling me, okay, I want to sit more, right? Because in many ways, a half hour is not long enough to go deep, right? You need a longer meditation practice, unless you're really trained and skilled at it. unless you've been practicing a long time. Like, if you're really trained at the jhanas, you can get in the jhanas like that, right? But for the rest of us, it might take a half hour just for our mind to start to calm down, right? So you kind of need more time if you're going deeper. So if you have that intuition that you can, and you are leaning towards the conditions are right for you to go deeper, then you want to increase your sitting, right? But other than that, if you want to split it between those multiple modes, that's perfectly fine. I like to sit first because for me, I like to walk first because for me, it's the easiest. I love walking meditation. It's always been kind of my forte, my go-to, in terms of formal meditation. And what I find is that it helps me the quickest to calm my mind and to get very peaceful. And then it's like I'm coming in for a landing on a plane, right? When I go to sit, my mind's already calm and peaceful, and I'm just coming in and sitting down, and I go right to my breath. No, all kinds of, trying to calm your mind down and breathing and following and all these kind of things. And so that's my suggestion, right? You know in your practice, okay, I think I need to sit longer. Now, I mean, if you are naturally able to sit longer and it's kind of, if you feel like you're able to and it's comfortable and you can do it and you want to do it, then sit longer. No problem. Each of us has our own little idiosyncrasies in the practice, right? Our own little tendencies and inclinations. Adriana, I found out recently that walking meditation has been much more impactful samadhi-wise. Yeah, me too. That's exactly what I just said, right? But walking, get very calm and peaceful and sit. So, and for some people, walking meditation is everything. And for other people, they don't want to ever walking meditate. Now, I suggest doing all 4 postures, at least 3 of the postures. I could forgive not doing lying down meditation because that's a tough one. It's a tough one to not fall asleep in. But you should do walking, standing, and sitting. Why? Well, I'm going to give the most wonderful Bhante Silananda answer to that, because our Lord Buddha says so. Because this is how he taught to practice evenly. I shouldn't say evenly. Doesn't mean like you practice 10 minutes of walking, 10 minutes of sitting, etc. It means that your practice stays, your mind stays calm, and your meditation and everything stays with you no matter what your posture. That's what it means practice evenly. You change your posture, but your mindfulness is still there. Your practice is still there. So all of these postures are very good. And, because listen, when I first, came to Bhava, and I first, was talking to Bhante Silananda even about walking, because I was like, can I walk outside? I don't want to be in the meditation hall sitting, and it's not good. I like to be outside and all these things. And he's telling me, he says, walking meditation is good. He says, there's even people who've become awakened just from walking meditation. My mind was like, ooh, that makes things easier for me. I should just do walking meditation. But then I knew the Buddha's words by then. I was like, no, that's an easy out. It's an easy out to just do that. I really should practice both. And that's what I recommend. Don't skip out on one or the other. That doesn't mean that you're not going to like one over the other, or that one is going to be more easier than the other. There's going to be that. But I would not suggest you just focusing on one. Grant. Oof. Wait a second. Oh, what happened? I lost. Something happened in the chat here. Grant. Oof. Retracts students of the path memes that use the Buddha. Yeah, I would say it's okay. But we have to be aware listen, we have to also be aware that students of the path, most of the people here are probably students of the path. There's maybe one or two people who know me from Buddhist Insights and things like that don't know student of the path. But our server is not really, how should I say this? Our server is not really traditional Buddhist friendly in that regard. Like if you kind of get offended easily, and there's gonna be sacrilegious stuff in there. We don't take it as like an insult, right? We're not trying to insult the Buddha or the Dhamma or the Sangha or anything like that. It's just a different way for us to connect with the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Sangha and the practice than for the people who grew up with it, right? So we do have to keep that into consideration, but I wouldn't say, just you have to totally stop it. We just have to be wise and know where we can do things like that and where we don't want to do things like that, right? That's why if I'm going to a Sri Lankan temple, I'm not like, hey, how you doing? Whoa, I'm just very very calm and subdued and things like that, So you just have to kind of know your audience, as it were, right? Believe me, I posted on my own Facebook on my Dhamma Funnies album. I posted the thing of King Leonidas from 300 over the Buddha's body that says, "This is karma," right? And I got some comments about it being disrespectful. So it's gonna be that way. You can't please, like, what is it? Abraham Lincoln says, you can't please all the people all the time. What are you gonna do? Javier, all right. Hey, Bante, can you say something on how the Brahma Viharas can be a foundation for insight? There's a lot of questions in this one compared to the last two. And that's fine. Like I said in the beginning, each one is going to be a little different. And I'm cool with that. I like that. Can you say something on how the Brahma Viharas can be a foundation for insight? Some sutras depict one practicing insight in some form or another after the Brahma Viharas. How can we do it? Buddha's very clear. I think it's, what is it? Green Obino is going to help me with this. There's a sutta where Sariputta, or is it Ananda, gives 11 ways in which you can practice and develop insight to become awakened. And obviously the four foundations of mindfulness, etc. But there's also the Brahma Viharas in there. So it is clear that the Buddha says that you can use the Brahma Viharas as a vehicle to awakening. And the reason why you can do this is because not only are they practices that you can develop to abandon ill will in your mind and hatred and all those such things, but they're also samadhi, they're also samatha practices. They're practices that calm the mind, quiet the mind, right? There's monastics who they don't use mindfulness of breathing, they just use metta. I don't know about his current practice, but I remember years ago when I was watching a talk, Bhante Analiar talks about how he uses metta as his practice, not mindfulness of breathing. And so this is definitely a way to calm and tranquilize the mind, because that's the point. We want to have a calm, tranquil mind, because a calm, tranquil mind gives us a good platform for seeing things as they are, right? For seeing things with vipassana, right? And how do we use this? How do we use something like metta as to develop vipassana, to develop insight? When we're really in our metta and everything's blissed out and we're so happy, we reflect. Even this metta is impermanent. Even this metta will change. It is unstable. Now I have a mind of metta. 20 minutes from now, I'll get in my car and I'll get angry at somebody who cut me off. Right? So we understand that this is impermanent. And then we do the same thing in the jhanas, by the way. The Buddha says, this jhana is impermanent. So all of these things, this metta is impermanent. This karuna is impermanent, right? All of these things are impermanent. This metta is dukkha. If I attach to this metta and I want this metta to stay with me always, right? And I like metta and I get attached to the mind of metta. When it goes away, dukkha. I know that one perfectly firsthand. Most of you have heard me talk many times about how I used to, before I went to the monastery and became a monk, I used to have blissed out Dragon Ball Z metta, like boom, like so much wonderful metta for all beings emanating from me, right? Blissful, wonderful feelings of metta. And that went away. What are you going to do? It happens, right? So because I was kind of attached to that wonderful feeling of metta, I suffered for it because I wanted to have that metta feeling again, right? So, and then this metta is not self. This metta is not mine, right? Not me. I'm so wonderful. I have so much metta for everybody, right? This metta is not mine, right? This metta is not me. This metta is not myself, right? So this is how we see things with Vipassana. We see them by seeing the three characteristics in everything. So anything that you're going to get attached to, use the three characteristics of existence. You say, oh, even this is impermanent. Even this will cause me suffering. Right? This is why the Buddha says when you get to the end, you let go of the raft. Right? The very last in the defilements, right? One of the last ones is a restlessness, right? Or the fetters, I should say, the restlessness, right? And this is one of the last ones that you abandon, right? So how that is traditionally described as is that this is restlessness to become awakened, right? So even towards the end, you kind of have this little anxiety, this little restlessness. Man, it's almost there. You know, I am almost there. Let's do it. I want to get this. I want to become awakened. All these kind of things, right? Because even till you become awakened, you still have the conceit I am, right? So even there, they're very subtle, but that's still there. That craving, that wanting. So even the desire to end all desire can cause you suffering. Now, skillfully, you could also bring it. You can use it as a vehicle to becoming awakened. But if you attach too hard to it, it can cause you suffering. Yes, Mumble, I had over 9,000 metta. Is that was 9,000? I don't know. It's been like 2 decades since I saw that. But that kind of magic, that is how I visualize my metta. Like because I'm a big, fantasy nerd and wizard. I love wizards and things. So for me, it's like magic that bursts out. But it could be Dragon Ball Z, whatever. This is the same thing. All those things. All right. Super Saiyan metta. Okay. Let's see if there's any in therapy. One of the first things psychologists had to bring up was how unrealistic it would be to expect positive feelings all the time. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Expectations equals suffering. If you expect, you will suffer. One of the greatest quotes I've ever heard in my life of Dhamma is, suffering is asking from the world what it cannot give you. That is, expectations equals suffering. I'm pretty excited. I turned off a browser extension and now I'm not having any lag on this. Very good. Truth is the way. Very good. I'm glad you are with us in full 4K HD, whatever it is. I don't know. I don't know what it is. Okay. Javier, yes, that's exalted release of mind. Right? Immeasurable is where like you give metta to the four corners, just as one quarters is the second, third, and the fourth, right? So northwest, southeast, up and down, right? So that's immeasurable metta, appamana. And then there's mahagata, which is exalted, which is where you start. It says start pervading exalted the roots of a tree, then the roots of three trees, and then the roots of a village, and the roots of three villages, and it goes all the way up until the loka, the world. So you could also, if you know loka, that could also mean universe. So when I do guided metta meditation, like I did last week, I think we did metta, did we? I don't know. We go all the way to the universe and beyond. Where did my robe go? There we go. All right. Let's see. Can you, Mumble Rocks, can you lose progress that you've made by reverting to unskillful behaviors? Like if someone who could access the jhanas could use drugs, would they lose it? Yeah. For something like jhanas, yeah. I would say that you could revert generally at a certain point. Like when I think to myself, about becoming a layperson again, I think to myself like to really enjoy things like sex and all these kind of things. I would really kind of have to try to force myself, like to fool myself. But in my mind, it's not really like there's always, I've reached a certain point, and I'm not saying I'm advanced at it at all. I'm not Sotipan or anything like that. But I've noticed that I've reached a certain point that a lot of the things that I would have been really into before, I'm not as into. And this was before I became a monk. This is one of the reasons. Like it wasn't like they didn't hold the same joy and attachment that they used to, right? So if I kind of went back and became a layperson again, I mean, I could enjoy this stuff. I could feel the pleasure and do all that kind of stuff, and whatever I wanted to do. But there'd be a part in my back of my mind that's like, you kind of know that this is that you want to go beyond this, right? So you reach a certain point. Now that doesn't mean that I could become a monk, and I could stop becoming a monk, and I could go and I could do all the drugs and and I would probably lose a good amount of meditation progress. But I don't know if I could fully lose that nibbida, right? That nibbindity, that kind of disenchantment that's already occurred. I mean, I guess it's possible, but I don't know. But we do know, obviously, for a fact, at least in this is something that's debated between Mahayana, Theravada, and all these things later. But it's very clear that once you become an arahant, you don't go back in the early Buddhist texts. It's not, you don't fall away from being an arahant. Before that, I don't know. But the jhanas specifically, the jhanas are dependent on living enough virtuous life that you don't have restlessness and remorse, right? If you're doing unskillful things, then that brings up this restlessness and remorse, and the jhanas are going to be far away. So something like the jhanas, yeah, I mean, this is like, you have even somebody like Devadatta, right? Devadatta, the Buddha's cousin who tried to kill him and tried to split the sangha and all this kind of stuff. He had psychic powers. He was a jhana practitioner. Now, of course, he lost them. Once he started going a little postal there, trying to kill the Buddha and split the sangha and do all that kind of stuff, he lost it. But he was able to get to that point as well. Johnny, I have been meditating for 3 years, but I've never really gotten the bliss that everyone talks about. We talked about this on the Discord. What's our opinion on this? It depends on what you mean by bliss. If you mean piti, like something that, like, I've never gotten piti either. I know some people who have told me that they have gotten it. They haven't gotten it to jhanas yet, but they've been able to have piti, and that's this kind of where different people describe it differently, but it's kind of like a feeling that is totally pervasive of your body. Ajahn Brahm calls it better than sex, right? And I've actually had some other monks who have experienced piti. They experience it's like the most pleasurable thing that you can experience. And it's all over your body. It just totally permeates your body, right? I've never experienced that. I've kind of sort of had close things that I might have, did I have like a split second of it? Like I've a couple times I've had this kind of feeling, this like really strong rush of energy where the only thing I can describe it is if I don't know if any of you have jumped out of a plane. I've only done it once. I did skydiving once, but that first split second that you're out of the plane and in the air, it's like this rush of like adrenaline and everything. And it's just so like, so when I experience that feeling, that's what it reminds me of. It's just like this boom. It's just like I'm kind of meditating and all of a sudden I'm just totally energetic, right? But I don't think that's PT. I mean, it might be a split second of it, but I don't think so. So, but that's what this PT is. And if you haven't experienced, it's okay. This is, this bliss, if that's what it is. The best thing that I've experienced about meditation, the most peaceful, wonderful, happy thing I've experienced in meditation is when the mind is totally calm and there's no likes and dislikes and my mind is quiet and there's nothing, all this like harping on that the mind does. All this likes, I like this, I don't like that, I want to do this, I don't want to do that, all this stuff backs and forth. It's just like a dog chasing its tail. It's so exhausting. When you're able to get to a point where your mind is just calm and you're just so content with being on the present moment and following your breath. It's so nice, so peaceful. That to me is really the best thing that I've experienced in meditation, is to be just for a little bit, to be free from that hell that is the mind's likes and dislikes and that kind of stuff. Bante, wait, did I miss something? Let me see something here. The truth is the way. Bante, Adriana, and I posted some questions above. It was about what you said about meditation. Did I not answer the questions? I thought I answered. Let me see here. Yeah, I answered Adriana's question about the the walking and the sitting. Hmm. So, Gabriella, how does one avoid backsliding in the practice? So, this is a good question. This is a tough topic. One of the best things in the sutras, the Buddha says, "Do not be leaders in backsliding." This person is a leader in backsliding, right? So backsliding, it's kind of like what the topic that we just talked about. Can you kind of backslide out of the practice? Um, how to not backslide? What I would say is you follow the Noble Eightfold Path. Try to follow your whatever practice you're doing, following restraint of the senses, trying to practice well, all these kind of things, right? But what you should understand is what is really backsliding and what's not. Right? If you are honestly and sincerely, and you have to know this about yourself, you have to look inside, you have to ask a question to yourself. You have to see if you are honestly and sincerely practicing, but it's slow and you mess up and then you try to do better and all these kind of things, then you're not backsliding, right? You are moving forward. It might be slow, but you're moving forward, right? When you know in your mind that you've kind of given up on the practice and then you're starting to let go of everything, then you're backsliding. That's when you know you're backsliding. So if you, if you are practicing, you're going to fail, you're going to fall back, you're going to not want to practice for a week or two or more, right? But you want to go back, all this. That's the important thing, right? You have to see in your mind that are you really doing your best? Are you really following the practice, or are you kind of sliding, right? That's how you know. As long as you are practicing, you're moving forward. Slow and steady wins the race. If you are backsliding, if you see that you're kind of like, I don't want to do this anymore, that might be a good time to listen to some Dhamma talks, get some inspiration, right? Let's see if you can come out of that that backsliding, right? The Dhamma is to give us zeal, Dhamma talks, and these kind of things to give us a desire to want to practice. Without that desire to want to practice, we're not going to do it. It's not going to be worth it for us. Doing the old Ajahn Brahm, where my robe keeps falling over. All right. You have to make sure you're not fooling yourself. That's important. That's why you never, once you become a Buddhist, a meditator, you follow the Buddhist the path, never allow yourself to be lied to, right? Your mind or Mara or whatever is going to say, well, this, but you know it's a lie. You know it's not the truth, right? So don't accept it. Don't accept the truth. Don't lie to yourself, and then you'll be able to understand. You'll be able to see if you're really backsliding or you're not. Jason Heath, what does an hour of metta meditation look like? Do you start with yourself, reach some endpoint, and then loop back, sending metta to yourself or going back to an endpoint. An hour of metta meditation, that's a long time. Different teachers will tell you different things. So what it looks like heavily depends on the person practicing it and the person teaching it. For some people, it's just kind of repeating the same phrases, over and over again. You can also stretch out a lot of the practice. You can, so you're not doing it fast, but you're stretching out, giving more time, like in between phrases, in between visuals, more time to kind of pervade and emanate in that one area, right? So you can stretch it out that way. But you could also loop back if you want, right? You can also do different types. Like, I pretty much follow only the two types that are kind of taught in the early Buddhist texts. I don't do first is for my a teacher, then a loved one, then a neutral person, then a bad person, enemy, etc. I don't do any of that. But sometimes if I'm doing a long period of it, I might do the directions first, right? And then I do the circle where I pervade up to the whole universe. And that alone, just doing those two, if you do it slow and meaningful enough and you're really trying to put meaning behind the words, it's not like just a mantra that you're repeating really quick. You're really trying to put a meaning behind those words. Then, that can take quite a while. And if you wanted to, you can repeat it. Or you could be, if you've reached the point where it's just visuals, you can just visualize. You can just keep visualizing, wherever, going out into the universe, coming back, however you want to do it. It's up to you. Cunning Corbett, the mind sure does like to talk to itself a lot. Yeah. And about itself. And about its likes and dislikes. And what it wants you to do. Right? The angel and the devil on your back. Sending you impulses. Let's do this. Let's do that. Gabriella, what question do you think I didn't answer? I've been going down the chat, and I don't know if I'm missing or if there's a connection problem or something. I'm not sure. Okay, I never got that question. The truth is the way. Do you ever use chanting as a meditative practice, or is that more of a Mahayana Vajrayana thing? That was my question. Okay, I never got that question in the chat. So there's some shenanigans going on. Also, wait. Okay. So I'll answer the first one. Do I ever use chanting as a meditative practice, or is that more of a Mahayana Vajrayana thing? I would say it is more of a Mahayana Vajrayana thing. It really, the chanting is for in Theravada is for memorization and recitation and blessings and things like that. But it's not really in and of itself. It's not supposed to have any kind of meditative value per se. You're not doing it for some kind of meditation. You're doing it to remember the Dhamma, right? It's kind of remembering, learning, practicing, and also, for paritas, like for protections, the view is that, this is supposed to bless a house or protect somebody, when they're born or something like that. But in terms of like using it as some kind of a mantra kind of a thing, then no, that's not really something that's too big in the majority of Theravada. There is such a thing as something called Tantric Theravada, but I know nothing about that other than that apparently it exists. Oh, I just jumped or stopped or something. So Adriana's question, wait, so you do walking and then standing, your practice method, death contemplation, and then anapana sitting. Well, whenever you do walking meditation, you're technically also doing standing, right? So you're starting in one spot and you're standing, you're moving forward, you're turning around and you're standing, and you're moving back and you're turning around and you're standing, right? And you can take as long as you want at those standing positions, right? You can do so. You're technically standing and walking, right? So those are the two postures in one practice. Jose, is there a good meditation or practice to dissolve anger? I have bursts of anger and fury when things do not go the way I want, and I would like to improve that. This is my biggest weakness now. Well, Jose, as Bhante G likes to say, when somebody's coming at you with the bat, you don't practice metta. Meaning, like, it's hard to practice metta when you're in the middle of anger. Metta is really more like to help you so that you lessen your anger, right? So what I would say is the best thing to do when you're angry is try to be as mindful of it as possible, right? It's going to be hard. It's not easy because really when you become really angry, it's like you're getting like, my example is always this like, somebody, some big strong man throws you in a roller coaster chair and straps you in and you're stuck on that ride until the end, until that anger's over. But the best thing I would say is to try to be mindful of that anger, right? Okay, right now my mind is feeling this way. My thoughts are, my impulses are telling me to do this and all that. I can try to be mindful and aware, and I can try to mitigate the damage that I might do with that anger, right? It's kind of like you're trying to hold back the Hulk from doing too much damage. You might not be able to stop the Hulk from doing any damage at all, but you might be able to at least minimize the amount of damage, right? So you're not going to be able to do some practice and flip a switch and you've magically eradicated your anger that was up. Right? Your anger has arisen due to a cause and condition, and it's going to continue for a while, and then it's going to cease. So what you can try to do is try to be mindful, try to reflect on, is this anger skillful for me? Is this helping me? Am I about to do something harmful to myself and others because of this anger? You're using your mindfulness to reflect on what this anger is. So the gratification, the danger, and the escape, right? The gratification of the anger. I'm angry. It feels good because this person's an idiot and that person did this and this person did this. And I don't like how this turned out, right? So that's the gratification of it. The danger of it is you make yourself suffer and you can harm yourself and others, right? And the escape is the abandoning of anger, right? But you can't try to force it away, right? You have to try to mitigate its damage while it's there and, try to reflect on it, use mindfulness and insight to allow it to start to fade away. And then you practice lots of metta and you practice reflecting on what anger does for you. Is it really worth it, right? Gabriel, I have two modes, 110% or 50%. I like that. That's funny. Mumble Rock, do you think practicing the Dhamma as a monastic turns always changes people's demeanor? There are so many kind-hearted, gentle monks, but some seem overly stern and grim, and that kind of turns me off. It's the practice. The practice changes your demeanor. The practice is what makes you more lighthearted, right? More happy. Now, what I will say is, and this goes back to what I was talking about, the different cultures. And a lot of the cultures, the expectation, like, to have this kind of gruff exterior, that's what's expected. That's how you're supposed to be, right? So you could be very lighthearted and peaceful and stuff inside, but you're kind of culturally conditioned to be like that, right? So that's something to keep in mind when you do see a monk who maybe is gruff, and things like that, overly stern or grim. There's a joke that somebody told me. I forgot who told it to me years ago, but they're talking about, like, in Asia, us Asian people are like very kind of lighthearted, and we're not too serious and all these kind of things. And so the monks have to be really stern and strong with us to keep us in line. But when you come to America, Americans beat themselves so bad anyway that they need the opposite. So, like, where Americans are already down on themselves so much that when a stern monk comes, right? This is why we are attracted to monks like the Dalai Lama. Like, that's, that to me, the image of a monk is a happy, smiling monk. Is Dalai Lama, then Ajahn Brahm, and so to me, that's like my image, but that's not everybody. Like, so we have to kind of understand that different monks are going to be different in their demeanor for a variety of different reasons. And you will like some monks and you won't like the other monks, right? There's some monks that I could listen to, and I love hearing their Dhamma talks. And then there's other monks who are world renowned. People love these monks. I get nothing out of listening to them. I don't connect with them. They're just kind of there. I mean, I respect that they're highly respected monks and people love them, but for me, they're just another senior monk. So keep that in mind, with that. But I would say, in my own experience, both in my own practice and also in dealing with some other people, not only just lay people, monks, but also lay people, the practice, because you start to take everything less seriously. And the reason why is because you're starting to take everything less personally, right? Anatta, not self. The practice starts to gradually give you the kind of a peace and a freedom from these things. And that kind of naturally gives you this lightheartedness. It's like you're free, right? When somebody's wrapped up, when somebody's so wrapped up in anger, wrapped up in these things, they don't have the bandwidth. They don't have the ability to kind see what they're doing and to see to see what's best for other people and themselves. And they don't have the bandwidth. Because they're so wrapped up in it. But as the practice allows you to be more free from these things, your mind becomes more calm and peaceful. Then you're just more the judgment and the criticism of yourself starts to fade away. And when the judgment and the criticism of yourself starts to fade away, the judgment and the criticism of others starts to fade away. You're less likely to want, this is how people should live. They're not living right. They're evil people. They're not right. They have the wrong views, all these kind of things, right? You start to let that go, right? Why am I doing this? This is only causing myself and others suffering, right? So that is a side effect of the practice. Is kind of a lightheartedness, peaceful, joyful thing. But I mean, even in the sutras, the Buddha says, you know, how's it go? Laughing, dancing is madness. Laughing is the Buddha essentially is like talks about like laughing and dancing and everything as like crazy madness, and don't do it for monks, right? He says, but if there is something in the Dhamma that is funny, it is okay to smile, right? So even the Buddha's, real instructions is you shouldn't be this kind of like me. You shouldn't be like me. I'm not dignified enough. I'm too brash and loud, and to some people probably very annoying. But I'm trying to find a good balance. Trying to be a little bit better in that regard. Gabriella, yeah, I didn't get that question. So that's 3 questions that I did not see in the chat. They just didn't get through. Reminds me of trying to text people in the mountain internet, and you just don't get text. Just sometimes the text just vanish into the air, and they never come to you. So yeah. How do you eliminate pride and contempt in practice? You mean pride in your practice, or just how do you eliminate pride and contempt through the practice? Adriana, Ajahn Brahm does the complete opposite and doesn't stop laughing. But Ajahn Brahm does have he does have a dignity. I mean, like he is self-deprecating and he does laugh, but he has a better balance at it. Like that's kind of like what I'm trying to eventually get to. I'm still a baby monk, so it's going to take me a while. But there's being dignified and also being funny at the same time. Yeah, so it's something that I'm sure comes with time, because we all know, if you know Ajahn Brahm's history, you see the pictures of him in Thailand, and he's like this, and they said that his Dhamma talks in the beginning were really bad, and he was gruff and all these kind of things, and now he's Ajahn Brahm. So it seems like the chat has come to an end pretty much. We still have about 20 minutes. We can do some more chanting. Although, Gabriella, I don't see you responding to my clarification of your question. How do you eliminate pride and contempt in the practice? See, that's such a wide thing, like pride and contempt towards yourself, pride and contempt towards the practice itself, pride and contempt towards others, and the practice itself lessens that. Like, what is there to be prideful of? It's like, for instance, I'll give you an example. Yeah, Jose, we can do a little short meditation, I guess, but there were so many questions that just kind of went with it. So, but like one example in terms of pride and contempt in the practice. I feel pride when I do well and contempt when others do bad. Yeah, that's the practice will lessen that. That is something that you have to kind of. That's when you reflect on when you have contempt and when others do bad. Bring that back to yourself, and you have to do it in a very skillful way. I mean, because you're not trying to beat yourself, but what you're trying to do is like you're trying to put yourself on an equal level as them, right? You're trying to be like, well, because that I've trained my mind so that anytime one part of my mind is like, oh, look at that person, and another part of my mind comes up as like, yeah, well, you're not exactly that great either, right? So I've trained my mind to kind of counterbalance those thoughts of like that kind of arrogance of like towards other people, right? So there's like the two people. There's the arrogant, those people, and then the person says, yeah, well, look at yourself. You ain't that great either, right? Jose, actually, I like to plan everything as well. So the truth is, the way I like how the live stream is free form, you never know what you're going to get. Just like a box of chocolates. No, Jose, it's the opposite for me. I like to plan everything. I also like to plan everything, which is why I force myself to do these kind of things, right? To just let it flow. Because one of the things I find, and this goes to kind of pride, right? Like people from the very beginning, people loved my Dhamma talks. I was thrown into giving Dhamma talks. I wasn't even a Samanera a month. People loved my Dhamma talks. I've almost never gotten any negative feedback about any of my Dhamma talks. And I want it because I want people, because that's how I learn. When I do get negative feedback, it really helps me to analyze it and things like that. So I've got very positive, people love my Dhamma talks, and people say, you're like the American Ajahn Brahm, and all these kind of, ooh, like my mind's like, ooh, really like these, like these things. But one of the things that I came to understand, it helped because I remember one teacher, it was a lay teacher, and he taught me, he says, I like to practice. He says, so when you just give a talk and you don't do a lot of prep before, it's called trusting an emergence, right? And that's what I do now. When I try to give a talk and I give other people the ability to give it the topic, I could totally botch that topic. I have no idea, right? I don't know what the topic is. I can totally botch it, right? But what happens is what I've learned to do is trust in that I have the knowledge inside, right? So one day I realized, because when I start doing that, I learn from my own talks. Like I've had stuff come out in a talk that I never clicked with before, that I never like, oh, that was really good. I got to remember that. I never thought of it in that way. And I'm the one giving the talk. Right? So what that made me realize was I can't take credit for that. Right? That's not my talk. Like, how am I taking credit for that? Right? And then what it made me also realize was, and this is the joke I say, is like, I can't take credit for that talk if you liked it. If you didn't like it, I also can't take credit for that talk. It's not my fault because I don't know what happened. It came out or it didn't come out, right? So I can't take credit for it. So why would I be prideful over a talk? Right? Now, what I do know is that, what is coming out from that immersion, also has a lot to do with my own practice and my own study. There's a basis there for it to draw from. But how it comes out is not under my control. Right? How it comes out. Like the talk on, like when I do a new topic, like the talk on living with uncertainty. I've done that talk 4 or 5 times now without any preparation. And every single one of those times, it's been a little different. And I've learned from those talks, right? And that'll help me actually make a better talk in the future, right? Every time I do that talk, there's a new, oh, I like that. Maybe if I try to remember that, right? So this is the important thing. Like when you start to realize that, maybe I'm taking a little bit too much credit, right? Now, of course, you have to know the balance, right? You also shouldn't demean yourself. Who do you think what have you done, right? No, you practice and you try to live well and follow the Noble Eightfold Path and all this. So that's good, right? That's sila nusati, reflecting on your good deeds. So it's a matter of balancing, right? And that's how you let go of the pride and that, like, are you awakened? If you're not awakened, then there's no need to be too prideful of your practice. And there's definitely no need to be agitated as somebody else is not doing the practice the way you think they should be doing, right? Is even awakened being. The Buddha is not, in the suttas, he's not, you're practicing stupidly. It's like, you should do this and you should do that. He doesn't do that, right? He, if people come to him and they'll say, I've done the stupid thing. He's like, indeed, you've been stupid, right? But he's not judging other people's practice, right? People are on their own path where they're at, whatever they're doing, that's their path, right? So and of course, I'll end it with that wonderful thing where the Buddha says, do not look at what others have done or not done. Look at what you have done and not done, right? So don't worry about others, right? Look at yourself. And so you can counteract that pride with, hey, you're not awakened yet. What are you so prideful about? Oh, you know all of the suttas? Are you awakened yet? No. Don't be so prideful. There you go. You tell yourself those kind of things. Reflect on that. It's not to beat you up. It's to bring you back to a balance, right? If you go too far the other way, then you have to practice metta for yourself with compassion and reflect on all the good things you do to come back to the middle. Yes, it is a good lesson in not self. So if you like this live stream, I have nothing to do with it. If you dislike this live stream, I have nothing to do with it. There you go. It's up to you guys. It's not me. Okay, well, I guess we can end it here. End it a little bit early as we have almost time over. Chat's done. People are dropping like flies. I see the little thing up there. So I think it's good for us to end tonight. Well, let's do our what you call it, merits. Let's do the dedicating of merits. Let me get to it first here. May the suffering ones be suffering free, and the fear-struck fearless be. May the grieving shed all grief, and may all beings find relief. May all beings share this merit that we've thus acquired for the acquisition of all kinds of happiness. May beings inhabiting space and earth, devas, nagas, and yakas of mighty power, share this merit of ours. May they long protect the Buddha's dispensation. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. All right, friends. Until next time, Sukhihotu, may you be happy, practice well, and be well. And those of you on the Second Life, I'll see you Saturday for a Second Life session and Sunday on the Discord for Suttas Monday. Until next time, friends.